And as everybody knows, there's a quid pro quo offering up U.S. access to these 12 GRU agents via Russian investigators. And the other thing that Vladimir Putin wants, in addition to having me handed over on a platter, is to have a number of other people involved in the Magnitsky Act or the Magnitsky investigations handed over on a platter. Vladimir Putin has asked for Kyle Parker, who is the chief of staff of the Helsinki Commission, and probably the single person in Congress who is most active on getting the Magnitsky Act passed in 2012. Vladimir Putin has asked for Bob Otto, who is an intelligence officer in the State Department, who was doing all the investigations from the State Department into the Magnitsky case leading up to the passage of the Magnitsky Act. The officials Vladimir Putin has asked for Todd Hyman and two other special agents in the Department of Homeland Security who were investigating the Preverzone case. The Preverzone case was a case in which the U.S. Department of Justice found money from the crime that Sergei Magnitsky exposed and was killed over going to New York. And so these people are being asked to be handed over. Jonathan Weiner, who is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for narcotics and organized crime, who was the person who originally conceived of the idea of the Magnitsky Act and advised me on it. They've asked him to be handed over. They've asked David Kramer, who was a State Department official in charge of human rights at the State Department. They've asked him, and he was previously president of Freedom House, who actively lobbied for the Magnitsky Act to be handed over. And so you have this unbelievable situation in which all these people are being asked to be handed over, and then most shockingly, yesterday, Sarah Saunders Huckabee, or Senator Huckabee Saunders, said they're considering it, and
And you could just hear the desperation in his voice. He is trying to cover up this weapons for drugs business. This Magnitsky Act is basically that. It's just a human rights cover-up of this illegal trade that the CIA has done with these Russian oligarchs. And it is a throw, it's a distraction. It seems obvious to me because all these people are involved in weapons and drugs, but it somehow can't be interpreted by the DC press kids, but we'll keep trying. The two Firestone brothers are going to be going back and forth, architecting these deals. Joe Biden is kind of their representative, and the Firestones are sort of representatives for the DuPonts, and that's just the way it is. Everything else is a contortion, and that's why this Magnitsky thing has never made sense to anybody, because it doesn't make sense. It's a euphemism for covering up this weapons channel. It's just that simple. If you look at Oleg Deripaska around the world, he's pushing weapons everywhere. If you look at the Awans all around the world, they're doing the laundering of the drug money. It's just that simple. It hasn't changed since Iran-Contra, and all these mental gymnastics for trying to explain all these intrigues when it just very simply, Kyle Parker sending Bob Otto a picture of a house so he can recognize it, and he's still a member of this Five Eyes group, this spy ring with these Russians. He's communicating with Andrew Wood. He's communicating with all the people in Australia. He is the inside man at the CIA for John Brennan for this Five Eyes group, and they're merchandising and selling the American secrets to the Five Eyes and everybody they can sell these technologies to in a controlled way, but it has to be called out for what it is, because if you don't call it out for what it is, you end up with these horrible contortions and just confusing news, and the straightforward answer is it's a coup. They're trying to cover their tracks, illegal business, and these are just very bad cover stories.